All right, so today we're diving deep into some Python fundamentals.
Oh,
We're
that's going.
talking variables and comments.
Yeah,
And the source material we have here is a YouTube video transcript, Python Study Club.
great source.
Yeah, they do a lot of good stuff over there. And I think this will be a good deep dive for people who are
Yeah,
just starting out with Python, or
absolutely.
maybe even people who've been coding for a little while, but they want to kind of get back to basics.
It's always good to refresh.
Exactly.
Like you can always, revisit these basic concepts,
Yeah.
even if you've been coding for a while.
Yeah, because if you don't have a good handle on these, you can
Exactly.
run into problems down the line.
Exactly. And, if you're working with other people too,
Yeah.
really important to have that common ground
Yeah, for sure.
in terms of understanding what a variable is, what a comment is,
Yeah, totally.
how to use them effectively.
So we're going to start with comments. And I think this is something that a lot of people maybe overlook,
Yeah.
especially when they're first starting out.
You just want to get to the actual code.
Yeah, you just want to write the code. You want to see something happen.
Yeah.
But comments are so important.
They're crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the video really stresses that their main job is to explain what the code is doing.
Exactly. They're like little notes that you
Yeah.
leave for yourself or for other programmers to explain what's going on.
Yeah. So, and they don't actually affect how the program runs.
Right. The computer ignores them.
Yeah. Python just skips right over them.
Yeah, they're purely for human understanding.
Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction to make
Absolutely.
because, sometimes you see comments that are like, well, duh, like,
Yeah.
X equals 5. This is the
Yeah.
value of X.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, I get it.
But, sometimes you need that level of detail.
But sometimes it's not that obvious.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and sometimes the logic behind why you chose to do something a certain way,
Right.
that's where the comments really come in handy.
Absolutely, because sometimes the code itself
Yeah.
might not be self-explanatory.
Yeah, especially if you come back to it like 6 months later.
Exactly. Or if someone else is looking at your code,
Yeah.
they need to understand what your thought process was.
Yeah, totally.
So comments really help with that.
Yeah, so there are two main types of comments that they talk about in the video.
Okay.
The first type is simple comments.
Yeah.
And those are just single line comments.
One line.
Yeah, one line. You
Yeah.
just start the line with a hashtag.
Okay.
And then everything after that hashtag is a comment.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, super simple. And they give an example here.
Yeah.
It's X equals 5 space, hashtag valeur de X.
Okay.
So valeur de X is French for value of X.
Okay.
So it's just a little explanation of what that line of code is doing.
Okay, so the computer reads X equals 5,
Right.
sees the hashtag,
Right.
ignores everything after that.
Exactly. And then moves on to the next line.
Got it.
So that's a simple comment.
Yeah.
And then they also talk about complex comments.
Okay, so these are multi-lines.
Yeah, multi-line comments.
Right.
And instead of using a hashtag,
Yeah.
you use 3 quotation marks
Okay.
to enclose the comment.
So 3 at the beginning, 3 at the end.
Exactly. 3 at the beginning, 3 at the end.
Okay.
And they can be either single quotes or double quotes.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
As long as they match.
As long as they match. Yeah.
Okay.
And they give a pretty lengthy example here, which I won't read the whole thing,
Right.
but it's basically just a big block of text
Okay.
that's enclosed in 3 quotation marks.
And this is useful when you need more than one line
Yeah, exactly.
to explain something.
Like if you're trying to describe a whole function.
Right. Or a complex piece of logic.
Yeah, or maybe like the overall purpose of a program.
Exactly.
You could use a complex comment for that.
Yeah. And that can be really helpful for documentation purposes too.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're working on a large project,
Yeah,
having those detailed comments can really save time
for sure.
down the road
Totally.
when someone needs to understand what that code is doing.
So to sum up comments,
Yeah,
they're super useful for human understanding.
absolutely.
They don't affect how the program runs.
Right.
And there are 2 main types, simple and complex.
Got it.
All right, so now let's move on to variables.
Okay.
And the video defines a variable as data carrying a label,
Oh, okay.
which I think is a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, I like that.
Because it kind of gives you a visual.
Right.
You have a piece of data and it's got a label on it.
So the label is the name of the variable.
Exactly. The label is the name of the variable, and
And-
then the data itself is the value.
Right. And the value can change.
Yeah, the value can change, and that's what makes it a variable,
Exactly.
as opposed to a constant,
Right.
which stays the same.
Yeah. And Python doesn't really have a specific way to define constants.
Yeah, they mentioned that in the video,
Yeah.
like some other languages do.
But the concept is still important.
Right.
You might have values in your program that you don't want to change.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can treat those as constants even if you're not explicitly defining them that way
Right.
in Python.
Yeah. And they talk about different types of data that you can store in variables.
Okay.
They mention 3 main categories.
Right.
Numeric types, alphanumeric types, and Boolean types.
So numeric, that's just numbers, right?
Yeah, numeric is just numbers.
Okay.
Like integers and floats.
Okay.
So integers are whole numbers,
Right.
and floats are decimal numbers.
Okay, so like your age would be an integer.
Yeah.
And your height would be a float.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then alphanumeric types are strings.
Strings of characters.
Right. So like words or sentences.
Right. So any text, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then Boolean types are just true or false.
Right. Just 2 possible values.
Yeah. And those are used for logic.
Yeah. For making decisions in your program.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do you actually create a variable?
So in Python, it's pretty easy.
Okay.
You just pick a name for your variable,
Yeah.
and then you use the equal sign to assign it a value.
Okay. So for example, if I wanted to create a variable called age
Yeah.
and set it to 29, I would just write age equals 29.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Python is smart enough to figure out that that's an integer.
Right. So I don't have to tell it what type of data it is.
Exactly. You don't have to explicitly declare the type.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. It's what's called dynamically typed,
Right.
which can be good or bad.
Yeah.
You know, it can make things easier, but it can also lead to some problems if you're not careful.
Right. If you're not paying attention to the types,
Yeah, exactly.
you can run into issues.
So, but when you're first starting out, it's kind of nice.
Yeah. It's one less thing to worry about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are some rules, though, about what you can and can't name your variables.
Okay.
And the video lays these out pretty clearly.
Right.
So first of all, the variable name has to start with either a letter
Okay.
or an underscore.
So no numbers at the beginning.
No numbers at the beginning.
Got it.
And then after that first character,
Yeah.
it can be any combination of letters, numbers, and underscores,
Okay.
but no spaces
Those spaces.
and no special characters.
So no like exclamation points.
Exactly. No question marks, no dollar signs,
All right.
no accented characters.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So even if it's a letter with an accent,
It's not allowed.
not allowed.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
And then the third rule is that you can't use a reserved keyword.
Okay.
So these are words that Python has already claimed for itself.
So words like if or for.
Exactly. If, for, while,
Right.
all those words have special meaning in Python.
So I can't use those as variable names.
You can't use them as variable names.
Yeah,
And the video says they'll talk more about reserved keywords in future videos.
okay. So there's a whole list of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
And we'll learn about those later.
Yeah, but for now, just know that you can't use them as variable names.
Okay.
And then the video gives some examples of good and bad variable names.
Okay.
So some good examples are prenom equals Mustafa, in quotation marks.
Okay.
Age equals 29.
All right.
And tail underscore on underscore meter equals 1.85.
Okay.
So those are all good variable names.
They follow all the rules.
Yeah, they follow all the rules.
Start with a letter.
Mhm.
Only letters, numbers, and underscores.
Right.
No spaces.
Yep.
And no reserved keywords.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then they give some bad examples.
Right.
Like prenom with an accent equals incorrect.
All right.
And age with an accent equals 29.
So those are bad because of the accents.
Yeah, because of the accents.
Okay.
And then tay space on space meter equals 1.85.
So that one's bad because of the spaces.
Yeah, because of the spaces.
Okay.
And then they show how to correct those bad examples.
Right.
So prenom becomes prenom without the accent.
Okay.
Age becomes age without the accent.
Right.
And tay space on space meter becomes tay underscore on underscore meter.
Right. So
Yeah.
just replace the spaces with underscores.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I'm getting the hang of this.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Once you know the rules,
Yeah.
it's not that hard.
And then they actually run some code in the video.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they show how you can assign values to variables and then print those values to the console.
So you can actually see it working.
Yeah, you can see it working.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good way to visualize it.
Yeah. It makes it more concrete
Total.
than just talking about the rules.
So to recap,
Okay.
comments are for human understanding.
Right.
They come into 2 types, simple and complex.
Single line, multi-line.
Yep.
Got it.
And variables are like labeled containers for data.
With specific naming rules. Okay. So I think a good question for the listener to think about is,
Yeah.
how do you think clear and effective commenting
Yeah.
can help you not only understand your own code better,
Right.
but also make it easier for other people to collaborate with you?
That's a great question.
Because if you're working on a big project with a team of people,
Yeah.
having well-commented code is so important.
Absolutely. It makes everyone's life easier.
Yeah, for sure.
It can prevent a lot of headaches.
And then another thing to think about is, we talked about these different types of variables.
Right.
Numeric, alphanumeric, Boolean.
Yeah.
How do you think those types relate to the different kinds of information we encounter in our daily lives?
That's interesting.
Because we're always dealing with numbers and words and...
Right, and making decisions based on true or false.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not just an abstract concept.
No, it's very applicable to the real world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the video mentions that this is just the beginning.
There's a lot more to learn about variables.
There's always more to learn in programming.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a continuous journey.
And they talk about more complex variable definitions and using IDEs.
Yeah.
Which is an integrated development environment.
Right, a tool that makes coding easier.
Exactly.
Cool.
So we'll be diving into those topics in future deep dives.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, this was a great start, though.
Yeah, I think this was a good overview.
Really solid foundation.
Yeah, of the basics.
Yeah.
So for you, the listener,
Yeah.
keep practicing, keep asking questions.
Yeah. Keep learning.
And remember that every coding adventure starts with these fundamental steps.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.